Imagine this. You're just 8 years old, excited for your first flight, but suddenly you're accused of causing a disturbance by a flight attendant. What would you do? Jaden and Jayce found themselves in this very situation, facing a tense moment that could have ruined their adventure. But their story isn't just about conflict, it's about standing up for what's right and the power of empathy. Stay tuned to see how they turn a nightmare into a victory. Wait, I think you forgot something. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe right now. Trust me, you don't want to miss the rest of this inspiring story. It was an ordinary day for the twin brothers, Jaden and Jayce. Both were just 8 years old, but their excitement was palpable as they stood in line at the airport. The air was filled with the anticipation of their very first flight, a trip they had dreamed about for months. Their tiny fingers gripped the straps of their matching backpacks, and their wide eyes sparkled with joy as they eagerly awaited their turn to board the plane. For them, it was a moment of adventure, a milestone in their young lives. Jaden and Jayce had been looking forward to this day with pure enthusiasm. It was a special occasion, an opportunity to step out into the world without the protection of their parents. They could hardly contain their excitement, chatting back and forth about what they'd do once they reached their destination. It was supposed to be a fun and thrilling experience for them, a first step into a world of independence. But everything changed the moment they approached the airplane door. As the twins made their way toward the aircraft, their lively chatter was suddenly cut off by a sharp, commanding voice. "You two, stop right there," the flight attendant barked. Her blonde hair was pulled tightly back into a neat bun, and her navy blue uniform gave off a no-nonsense vibe. She stood there, her eyes narrowed in suspicion, glaring at the boys with an expression of disdain. The sudden interruption caused the boys to freeze, their smiles instantly fading as confusion swept over them. Neither Jaden nor Jayce could understand what was happening. They had followed all the rules, stood in line like everyone else, and were simply excited to board their flight. But now, they were being singled out for no reason at all. They exchanged uncertain glances, their youthful faces filled with confusion and fear. Without any further explanation, the flight attendant began pointing a stern finger at them, her voice rising in volume. "You need to return to the terminal," she demanded. "This is not the way to behave on an airplane." Her accusations were sharp and harsh, laced with an intensity that was both uncalled for and frightening. Jaden, feeling overwhelmed by the sudden shift in energy, pulled out his smartphone, his hands trembling as he tried to call their mom. But the attendant, unmoved, continued her tirade. "You've caused a disturbance," she shouted. "You didn't follow proper boarding procedures." Jayce, unable to comprehend the gravity of the situation, instinctively clung to his brother's side. His heart pounded in his chest, and his small frame seemed to shrink under the weight of the attendant's words. The boys were trapped in a situation they had never imagined. A day that was supposed to be full of excitement was turning into a nightmare. All they could do was stand there, powerless and afraid, as the attendant's anger intensified. As the confrontation unfolded, the tension in the air became almost suffocating. The flight attendant's anger seemed to intensify with every word, and the weight of her harsh accusations pressed heavily on the boys' innocent hearts. Her voice, which had started as a sharp command, was now a rising tide of frustration. She was relentless, her words punctuating the air like a whip cracking with each rebuke. The atmosphere around them shifted. The once bustling cabin fell silent, save for the heated exchange at the airplane door. Passengers, who had been absorbed in their own routines, now began to take notice. Some, curious about the commotion, peeked over their seats to get a glimpse of the scene unfolding. Whispers rippled through the cabin as people exchanged looks of confusion and surprise. It was clear to everyone that something was wrong, yet no one spoke up. The boys were trapped in the center of the storm, feeling more exposed with every passing second. Jaden's heart pounded as he tried to make sense of the situation. His small hands fumbled with his smartphone, desperately trying to reach his mom. The trembling words escaped his lips. "We're just kids. We're excited to fly. We didn't do anything wrong." His voice, filled with innocence and fear, was barely audible above the attendant's tirade. He looked up at the flight attendant, hoping she would understand, hoping for a moment of empathy. But all he received was a dismissive glare. "Don't make excuses," the attendant snapped, her voice cold and unyielding. "You should know better." Her words stung, cutting through the air and landing heavily on the boy's shoulders. It felt as though the weight of the world had suddenly shifted to them. They weren't being heard. They weren't being given the benefit of the doubt. To her, they were nothing more than a disturbance, a source of inconvenience that needed to be corrected. Jayce, standing silently by his brother's side, felt the sting of humiliation wash over him. His eyes began to well up with tears, but he remained quiet, unsure of what to say or do. He could feel the lump in his throat growing larger with each passing moment, but the words wouldn't come. What could he possibly say to make things right? The situation was so far beyond their control that it felt like the ground was slipping away beneath them. They had never been in trouble like this before. Their hearts, usually full of joy and adventure, now felt heavy with confusion and fear. The boys were not only embarrassed, but also felt completely alone. The attendant's unyielding tone and the harshness of her words made them feel small and insignificant, as if they had no voice in the matter at all. They had never been in a situation where an adult held such power over them, and they felt helpless in the face of this authority. All they wanted was to board their flight, to begin their journey, but instead, they found themselves tangled in a web of misunderstanding and injustice. Just when it seemed like the situation couldn't possibly get worse, a new voice cut through the tension. It was different, calm, composed, and filled with a sense of understanding that the boys had longed for. From behind them, a flight attendant approached with a serene presence, her steps purposeful but unhurried. Her eyes scanned the scene, taking in the interaction between the boys and the angry attendant with a look of disbelief. It was clear to her that something wasn't right. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her tone gentle but firm, in stark contrast to the stern flight attendant's sharp commands. Her voice immediately brought a sense of relief to the boys. It was a sound they hadn't realized they had been longing to hear. Someone who sounded kind, someone who might actually listen. The first attendant, still furious, turned to face the newcomer, her frustration bubbling over. With a pointed glare, the stern attendant launched into an explanation, still insisting that the boys had caused a disturbance and needed to be removed from a boarding line. But the second attendant, calm and unshaken, interrupted her with a quiet authority that immediately shifted the atmosphere. "These boys haven't done anything wrong," she said firmly. "They are just excited to be on the plane. This is their first flight alone." The words were like a breath of fresh air, and for the first time since the incident began, Jaden and Jayce felt a sense of validation. The tension that had built up around them seemed to dissolve, and they felt the weight of their fear begin to lift. The second attendant's presence was like a beacon of understanding, shining through the darkness of their humiliation. She wasn't judging them. She was seeing them for who they truly were, two young boys full of excitement, not troublemakers. With a reassuring smile, the second attendant knelt down to the boys' level, her eyes softening as she looked at them. "Don't worry. Everything is going to be all right," she said warmly. "I'll take care of this." Her words were comforting, like a protective shield enveloping the boys. For the first time in what felt like forever, Jaden and Jayce felt like they weren't alone. Someone had stepped in to help, someone who truly cared about their well-being. The boys exchanged a glance, their wide eyes filled with hope. The empathy in the second attendant's voice gave them a sense of relief they hadn't expected to feel. Maybe, just maybe, they hadn't been forgotten in all the chaos. Maybe someone believed in them after all. It was a small flicker of hope, but it was enough to remind them that things could still be okay. With the arrival of the calm, understanding flight attendant, the tension in the air began to rapidly dissolve. The new attendant immediately took control of the situation, her calm demeanor working like a balm to soothe the frazzled nerves of everyone involved. She turned toward the other passengers who had been watching the scene unfold, explaining in a measured tone that the boys weren't being disruptive. They were simply caught up in the excitement of their first flight, and no real disturbance had occurred. Her words, clear and firm, started to shift the narrative. She made it clear to everyone that these were just two young boys, eager for their adventure, not troublemakers. The crowd, which had been subtly eyeing the scene, now began to relax. The understanding flight attendant's explanation made it evident to everyone that the situation had been blown out of proportion. The stern flight attendant, who had been the source of the conflict, finally seemed to realize the misunderstanding. Her face flushed with a mix of frustration and embarrassment. She looked at the boys, then at the second attendant, and reluctantly backed off, muttering under her breath, "I'll let it go this time." Her voice was tinged with irritation, but the power had shifted, and the moment of tension slowly began to fade. It was clear that she, too, had been caught up in a situation that could have been avoided with a little more patience and understanding. For Jaden and Jayce, it was as if a heavy weight had been lifted from their shoulders. Though they were still shaken by the events, a sense of relief washed over them. They hadn't been wrong, and they hadn't been abandoned. The second flight attendant had listened, validated their feelings, and stepped in to correct the unjust treatment. In a world that often seemed so much bigger and scarier than them, this moment felt like a small victory, a reminder that standing up for themselves could make a difference, even when it seemed like the odds were stacked against them. The second flight attendant gently led them to their seats, her voice soothing as she made sure they were comfortable. She checked that they had everything they needed, offering them reassurance that they were in good hands. Jaden and Jayce exchanged a quiet, relieved smile, feeling the warmth of her kindness. For the first time since the ordeal had begun, they felt like they could finally breathe. The plane's engines roared to life, and as it began its ascent into the sky, Jaden and Jayce settled into their seats, their nerves still tingling but their hearts lighter. They had made it through. They had stood their ground, and in the end, justice had prevailed. The journey that had started with confusion and fear now held the promise of adventure, and with that, they allowed themselves to smile, knowing that things would be okay. As the plane finally lifted off the ground, Jaden and Jayce sat side by side, their small hands gripping the armrests as the excitement of their first flight began to take over once again. The roar of the engines filled the cabin, but for the first time that day, the noise was comforting rather than intimidating. They exchanged a look, a mix of relief and quiet triumph passing between them. The earlier moments of fear, confusion, and humiliation now seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a sense of accomplishment. They had faced adversity head-on, standing their ground in a situation that had felt out of their control. But through it all, they had learned a valuable lesson. Their voices mattered. Even in the face of authority, they had refused to be silenced. They had found the strength to assert themselves, and in doing so, they had proven that even the smallest voices could make a difference when they were heard. It wasn't about defying authority or being rebellious. It was about standing up for themselves when they were unfairly treated. As the airplane soared higher into the sky, Jaden and Jayce gazed out the window, their wide eyes taking in the vast expanse of clouds below them. The world outside seemed so much smaller from up here, and the things that had once seemed so big and scary now felt more manageable. The calmness of the sky, the endless stretch of soft, white clouds, filled them with a new sense of wonder. This was their moment. Their adventure had truly begun. They leaned back in their seats, the hum of the airplane blending with the rhythmic beats of their hearts. For the first time since the confrontation, they felt at peace. The earlier tension that had consumed them had evaporated, replaced by a quiet sense of pride. They had faced down a situation that had seemed impossible, and now they were free to enjoy the journey that lay ahead. This moment, suspended in the air with the world below them, was one they would never forget. It was an experience that would shape them in ways they couldn't fully understand yet. More than just a flight, it had been a lesson in resilience and courage. They had learned the importance of standing up for what was right, even when it felt like the world was against them. And most importantly, they had learned that kindness, empathy, and understanding could overcome even the toughest of conflicts. The second flight attendant's gentle approach had shown them the power of compassion in difficult situations, and it was a lesson that would stay with them forever. As the plane continued its journey through the sky, Jaden and Jayce sat quietly, knowing they had grown in ways they never expected, and that they would carry these lessons with them for the rest of their lives. The story of Jaden and Jayce teaches us a powerful lesson about standing up for what is right, even in the face of adversity. It reminds us that even the smallest voices can make a difference when they are heard, and that resilience in the face of unfair treatment can lead to positive outcomes. Additionally, the story highlights the profound impact of empathy, kindness, and understanding in resolving conflicts. The intervention of the second flight attendant demonstrates how compassion and patience can de-escalate tense situations and bring about fairness. Ultimately, this story encourages us to never underestimate the power of standing firm, seeking help when needed, and the ability of kindness to transform difficult moments into opportunities for growth and resolution. If you enjoyed this story and the lesson it brings, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this to light. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an inspiring journey. Thanks for watching.